evening, welcome. All right, if we could go to the next slide and help people with the different tools that we'll be using tonight would be great.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Lisa Byrne and I work in our Community Relations Department with the Tigard-Tualatin School District. And this evening, we will have the chat available during the meeting if you have technical issues or need some assistance with Zoom. We will have polls happening throughout the meeting. Our first poll will be asking our attendees if they are listening in another language, and we ask that you select the language you're listening in so we can have an idea of who might be listening in those languages. And below on this slide, you can see that we have interpretation available this evening in Spanish, Arabic, Somali, Mandarin, and Marshallese. The platform doesn't have an option to select those languages under the interpretation button. So some of those languages, for example, Arabic is assigned to Portuguese, Somali is assigned to French, Mandarin is assigned to Chinese, and Marshallese is assigned to Korean. If you want to select to listen in one of those languages, you would click on the button at the bottom of the screen that says interpretation, and then you would select the language that you would like to listen in. Spanish, of course, is available in Spanish. And then if you only want to hear that language or that the interpreter speaking in that language, you would need to mute the button in that same button, interpretation button, you would need to mute the original audio. Buenas tardes y bienvenidos a todos. Hoy vamos a empezar nuestra junta, pero si quieres escuchar en español, por favor, oprima el botón abajo en la pantalla que dice Interpretation o Interpretación y oprima español. Y si no quieres escuchar el otro, el audio original, por favor también oprima Mute Original Audio or Original Audio, Mute Original Audio. Okay, I think we'll begin our meeting now.
So we would like to know, yep, thank you. If you, who might need interpretation. So if you could take a minute to complete the poll. Okay, we'll get started. Next slide, please. So we wanted to welcome everyone today. Thank you so much for joining us. And an opening welcome from Dr. Sue and Dr. McCall.
Thank you, Xenia. And I want to say thank you to all who have taken the time this evening to join us for the first of a series of community information and listening sessions that will inform and as well help us to learn about the history, the roles, the future of school resource officers in Tigard-Tualatin schools. I begin this evening by centering all of us in the TTSD mission and vision, which is Our mission is to educate every child. Our vision is that every student thrives in schools and graduates prepared to succeed. So how do we activate this vision and mission and bring it to life? We do this through working in collective community with high expectations. Tonight's process is a great example of that. We do that by believing in all students. We do that by using culturally responsive instruction. And we do that by hiring, supporting, and retaining talented staff as catalysts for learning. Then, by doing all of that, we will have created a nurturing school community where every student feels safe, valued, and responsibly prepared for success in a rapidly changing world. This collective action is demonstrated here tonight. Community is how we do our work. All perspectives are welcome and needed for us to understand what is needed for us to do our work and to identify where we need to adjust. And this is critical. We come together to listen, to discuss, to heal, and to move forward together better and stronger. SROs are an important component of how we do our work. They are our partners in this work. We recognize our world has changed dramatically, and for us to create environments in our schools today where every student feels safe, invested in, and valued, we must continually assess what they are experiencing in our buildings. As we progress through this process, we will be listening and learning from all. But most importantly, we will be seeking out and raising up the voices of those we don't often hear from, our students and family of color, our Black students and families, and others who have been marginalized and not given a platform to speak about their experience. We are all here tonight committed to this process and to working together on behalf of all of our students. And I absolutely want to recognize and thank these partners who have been in this work. The cities of Tigard and Tualatin, the Tualatin and Tigard Police Departments, the Tigard and Tualatin School Resource Officers, and our facilitators in this work, Tara Cooper and John Lenson. And especially my thanks to our district leaders who are here tonight to contribute to this conversation and to share their experiences. And so with that, it is now my pleasure to introduce to you Assistant Superintendent, Dr. Lisa McCall.
Good evening, everyone. I am happy that you can join us this evening. And the word that I want to emphasize is two things. One is community and listening. And so this is an opportunity for us to come together as a community, as Dr. Ricky Smith shared with you all. And with that, we want to listen to the different perspectives, because in order for us to be better together, we need to hear, and as our art of community is listen with intent to learn something new. So with that, I will turn it back over to Director Zinnia on.
Thank you, Dr. McCall. Hi, my name is Zinnia Un, the Director of Equity and Inclusion, and I wanted to go through our process today. Next slide, please, tonight. So as Dr. McCall had highlighted, we do anchor in our community. And so I welcome some of our participants here and panelists to read some of these tenets into our space tonight. So I'd like to start with Tyler Davila.
We acknowledge that we bring our lived experiences into our conversations.
We strive to be in community with one another with care.
Sorry, I froze there for a second. We strive to be in community with one another with care.
Andy?
We try to stay curious about each other.
Margie?
We recognize that we need each other's help to become better listeners.
Angelita?
We slow down so we have time to think and reflect.
Tim,
We remember that conversation is a natural way we think together.
Michael,
We expect it to get messy at times.
and Dr. McCall.
Sorry. We recognize that we need each other's help to become better listeners, and in that we add better together.
And we will listen with intention to learn something new. So as we go to the next process, next slide, please. Our goals for the night is to share some information about the history of partnership between TTSD and school resource officers, understand the day in the life of an SRO, and unpack the school resource officer's role in schools. You'll find that we'll do this in two parts. We will have an information section, and then we'll be passing it on to our moderators, John Lenson and Tara Cooper. And then finally, Tracy Rose will share a little bit about how we'll continue to answer some of your questions.
Thank you. As we progress through this process, through the community process, we will work to build in the answers to all the questions that we are receiving from the community throughout our community processes, presentations like this evening. But we have also created an FAQ that we will continue to build with the questions that you all have and submit that will live on our website. And it is currently posted on our website, and we, along with our partners, will push it out through our social media platforms. So at the end of this presentation tonight, you will get a little more information, and we will put the link up in the chat so you all can provide any questions that we weren't able to address this evening.
Thank you. Next slide, please. So the next portion, you'll get to hear from folks that will be sharing their experiences and our panel for tonight. Specifically, we are going to be focusing on our building administrators, though we have district administrators here as well. And we have our school resource officers that will share their experience and perspective. Next slide, please. So you've already heard from Dr. Sue, you've already heard from Dr. McCall. So I invite Director Fields to introduce yourself, and then we'll go down the list. Director Amber Fields, if you are talking, you are on mute. Okay, let's move on to Director Darren Bernard.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Darren Bernard. I'm Director of Operations, and I've also been a previous administrator in all three levels, elementary, middle, and high school.
Hello, everyone. My name is Russ Romas. I'm the principal of Creekside Community High School. If you haven't heard of Creekside, we are a small but important third high school. We serve about 200 students who work with various obstacles and struggle to find success.
Zinni, I think my button's working now. Hi, everybody. I'm Amber Fields, Director of Secondary Career and College, and also a former administrator at Tigard High.
Hello there. Good evening. I'm Angelita Miller. I'm one of the associate principals at Tigard High School, and I've also been over at Tualatin as the multicultural coordinator.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tyler Davila. I'm an associate principal at Tigard High School.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Margie Rosika, associate principal at Tualatin High School.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kim Holden, also an associate principal at Tualatin High School.
Hello, my name is Officer Nicholas Nunn. I'm the school resource officer at Tigard High School.
Good evening, everybody, and thanks again for being here. My name is Brian Bailey, and this will be my second year as principal at Tigard High School.
Hi, everyone. I'm Michael Delerba. I am in my 3rd year as principal at Tualatin High School.
Hi, I'm Officer Brian Imus, been with Tigard Police for about 12 years now, and from 2016 to 2020, when a little pandemic hit, I was the SRO at Tigard High School.
My name is Tim Gross. I'm the principal at Hazelbrook Middle School. It's my 3rd year as a principal and my 9th year as an administrator at Hazelbrook.
Hello, Andy Van Fleet, previously at Tigard High School, currently the principal at Fowler Middle School.
Hi there, I'm Officer Brian Miller. I'm one of the school resource officers for Tualatin High School.
Hi there, I'm Jamie McDonald. I am the commander for the services division, which is where the school resource officers live here with the Tigard Police Department, and also a former SRO from 2006 to 2010.
And Sergeant Rankin is not with us tonight, so we'll move on to our moderator, John Lenson.
Hello, everybody. I'm John Linson, and I am one of the facilitators for the listening sessions.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Tara Cooper, and I am the other facilitator for our listening sessions.
All right, thank you. Next slide, please. Take it away, Officer Nunn.
So the Tigard Police Department has had a 43-year history working with the school district. In 1977, going back at least to 1977, we had officers working in the school district. At that time, they were referred to as a juvenile officer, and they worked with the schools. In around 1984, the position became known as a school resource officer, or what's known now as the SRO. During that time as SROs, we've had as many as 4 SROs, and they were supervised by 1 sergeant, and then as few as 2 SROs. Our SROs have instructed both DARE and GREAT. We have run summer camps, and we had helped run a successful peer court. Next slide.
Hi there. The Tualatin Police Department has partnered with Tigard-Tualatin School District for 33 years. The first Tualatin SRO was assigned in 1987, and that was the inception of the Tualatin Police Department. In 1994, the department added a second SRO position, and approximately 12 years later, in 2006, a third SRO position was added to the program. So we currently have 2 SROs assigned to Tualatin High School and 1 to our middle school. And then we all basically are assigned one of our elementary schools and any charter schools or private Christian schools in our city. All of our SROs currently are GREAT curriculum certified, and we do currently teach GREAT in our middle school. And we have taught DARE within the Tualatin Police Department over the years. And we still currently have a GREAT summer component camp that we hold every summer. Due to COVID, we weren't able to do that this summer, but that's been going on since 1993. Next slide.
All right, Officer Imus here again. Let me go over the part of the roles of the school resource officers. The first thing I want to hit on is building relationships. And I think there's a reason why that's the first bullet point, is that's a huge part of the job we do. And that includes both the student population as well as staff. We work extremely close with obviously school administrators, counselors we get involved with, support staff, security, anybody that's you know, at the school, then we have a relationship with. Teachers invite us into their classrooms all the time to talk as well. So relationships are extremely important. And the next thing is the student relationship. I think that really helps the rest of the job we do, because if you have a good relationship with a student, they're going to trust you and be more willing to come and talk to you about things that might be difficult in their lives or at home. So building those relationships is a key component to our job. The next thing I want to hit on is maintaining a positive presence and assisting with school events and things like that. These are some of the most fun times as a school resource officer. We do a variety of things like football games, basketball games, dances. I've been known to get pulled out on the dance floor a time or two. The school events, we try to show a different side of us. A lot of the time too, they'll have a theme for like a football game, and oftentimes the students will dress us up in that theme. So it's a lot of fun and just a different vibe. Also, the presence in the hallways and around the school is always there. We're involved in all the assemblies, helping out with lunches or after school with pickup, all that. So we're constantly, in the forefront of being seen by students around. The next thing is the safety and emergency procedures. In this day and age, you have to be prepared for any major event at schools. So we help and partner with the school for different safety plans for different events. We at Tigard, I can't speak for Tualatin, but I'm sure they do the same thing, as we like to invite patrol officers as well into these situations so they can see how a major event might be run and get a layout of the school as well. And then the last thing I'm going to hit on before throwing it over to Brian Miller is patrol the school campuses and monitor the community for any concerns they may have. So yeah, that's a big part of our job, being present at the school as a safety resource. We're constantly going around the school building as well as the entire campus to see if there's anybody that could be on campus that should not be. We're also very involved in particular Tigard High School. There's a lot of parking issues in the community with students parking there. So we handle a lot of the brunt of that as well. So that's a variety of things that we do. And I'll give it over to Brian Miller.
Thanks, Officer Imus. I just have a few other points, roles that we fulfill in the schools. We collaborate with school personnel as well as families around education and intervention around risk-taking behaviors. We assist with medical emergencies at our various schools that we're assigned to, and assist emergency personnel when needed. We work with DHS when there's a safety or welfare concern with students. I think Imus hit on service guest speakers in classrooms on issues regarding personal safety, internet safety, and civil rights. And lastly, we do complete police reports for incidents that could include assault, child abuse, thefts, threats of violence, weapon possession, drug and alcohol possession, and social media threats. I think it's really hard to kind of list out all the roles of a school resource officer that they fulfill within a day. I think each day is different. And, I look at it as it's right in my title. I'm a resource officer. So anything that the school is asking me to do, to intervene, to help out, I want to help. That's part of that partnership of work, why it's been so successful. So when they reach out, if there's a way that we can help, we will. Next slide.
Sorry. This is Jamie McDonald from the Tigard Police Department again, and I'm going to talk about how the school resource officers are selected. It's largely very similar between both agencies. In fact, often we've partnered with each other when it comes time to select an officer for that other agency. And we do that because that way we have maybe some experience with working in the schools with the district, but also may not know the officers that are a part of that application process. So there's a minimum qualification, not just anybody gets to put in for it. Generally speaking, you have to have been a police officer for a minimum of 3 years. And sometimes there are some additional requirements. A little bit of difference between Tigard and Tualatin is the rotation time. Tualatin does a 5-year rotation and Tigard does 4. And that just aligns with each agency's other specialty assignments that we have that are time limited. And that's the difference there. But when it comes down to the actual process for the school resource officer selection, it's very similar. The officers that are interested will put in a letter of intent and a resume that outlines their qualifications and their reason for wanting to be a school resource officer. After those have been received, then a supervisor does a review of the applicants. And we're very careful about the selection of the officers that go to work in the schools. It isn't just a rubber stamp that they get to go and work in the schools. If they have some sort of performance history that might hamper their ability to be effective and to be successful working in the schools, that may be a disqualifying factor for them being able to proceed farther in the process. Once all of the applicants that are qualified have been vetted, we move them forward to an interview process. That interview process will typically include a supervisor from each or from the organization that is selecting that officer. It will include a school resource officer from another police department, maybe even another school district. For example, we have used Beaverton Police Department to help us with selections of SROs in the past. And it will also, and this is probably a critical component, is it includes a school administrator, likely from a school that SRO would be assigned to be working in. And the reason is because going back to the beginning when officers Imus and Miller were talking about the role, is it's about those relationships and that community building between the school and the officer that's working there. And that relationship begins in that interview process, because we want to make sure that the person that's being sent into those schools is going to be the right person for that particular environment. So the final decision is actually approved by the chief of police at each organization. So in Tualatin, it would be approved by Chief Steele, or here at Tigard, it would be approved by Chief McAlpine. And if there is any reason that the chiefs should think that maybe that person isn't appropriate, they would have a conversation with the supervisor that's a part of that selection process, and then probably with the school administrator before they make a final decision. But that's generally what it looks like for the process. And once they're selected, then they would end up going through training that's specified for school resource officers. Next slide.
So it's Officer Nunn again. So the funding of SROs kind of is a combination. It's also a partnership. Generally speaking, the SROs have worked on a contract, a year-to-year contract with the school district. Those contracts vary between the departments a little bit, but for Tigard, the estimated cost for 2021, if we were going forward with this year's school contract, it would have been for 2 SROs for an approximate cost of $318,000 for the 12 months. This isn't the salary for 2 SROs. This includes the salaries, the benefits, any overtime, equipment, some of the training that we go to. So that's a combination, not just of salaries, but a combination of the cost of an officer. The school district in the past contracts have paid for 50% of 9 months of the most senior officer assigned as an SRO. So For Tigard, it's out of the 2 SROs that we had, the most senior officer for basically the 9 months that that officer is working in the schools. The school district pays for 50% of their salary. So once again, for an estimation, we estimated for the school year of 2020 to 2021, the contribution that the school district would be paying for is about $59,000. So for $59,000, they're getting 2 dedicated SROs. So if you break that down divide that by the 318, school district's paying about 19% of the total cost for 2 SROs. Next slide.
Okay, this is Officer Miller again, and Tualatin Police also has a yearly contractual agreement with the school district, and we've also calculated estimated cost for the 2020-21 school year for our 3 SROs, and that cost estimate is $576,170, and that also includes, like Officer Nunn had said, the salaries, the benefits, the incentive pay, overtime assumption, training, vehicle maintenance, and then if that was to go forward, Tigard-Tualatin School District's contribution, same type of deal. The school district will pay 50% of 9 months of the most senior officer assigned as an SRO in that particular year. And given those estimated costs for the 2020-21 school year, Tigard-Tualatin School District's contribution would be approximately $73,500 for the 3 SROs, which is about 13% of the total cost. Next slide.
So to provide a little bit of context for some slides that are coming up here, I just want to share with you what our district demographics are in terms of the makeup of our student population here in Tigard-Tualatin. This information here in this pie chart is taken from our 2019 Oregon Department of Education report card. And as you see here in the pie chart, we're predominantly white school district. 57% of our students associate or identify as white. That's the kind of the dark gray bar there. If you go across from that to the lighter gray bar, about 26% of our students are of Hispanic or Latino ethnicity. And the other bars there correspond to dark blue, 5% Asian. The red bar represents 7% multiracial students. The light blue bar represents 2% Hawaiian or Pacific Islander population of our student body. The kind of turquoise colored bar, or sea green, if you want to call it that, is 2%, which represents our Black and African American student community. And the smallest bar there, the 1%, is our American Indian and Alaskan Native category of students. So this will give some context to the data we're about to share with you here in a couple of minutes. Next slide, please.
It's Officer Nunn again with Tigard Police. So going forward, both myself and Officer Miller are going to talk about referral data. So in Washington County, what you typically think of as an arrest where somebody gets put in handcuffs and taken away, oftentimes to jail. In a juvenile system, it works a little different. Typically what we do, on very rare occasions, it's different, but typically what happens is we refer a juvenile. If somebody's done something illegal, we refer them to the juvenile system. Very rarely will you see us or any officers arrest somebody and put them in handcuffs and take them away. They're referred to the juvenile system. Typically what happens if we're referring somebody, then they are actually released back to the schools or to their parents, depending on what the school district's doing. But in the next several slides, you're going to see both Tigard and Police's kind of referral data. We have it broke down sort of into 4 different categories. Your first one is a dispatch call. So dispatch call is where somebody calls into our dispatch center. They call 911, they call non-emergency and say, you know, something just happened, we need an officer. So that is a dispatch call. Dispatch then calls us on the radio and we respond. So it's dispatched. We are dispatched. The second one listed is a school referral. So as SROs, we are assigned to the schools. So at any time, if the school needs something, they have our cell phones numbers and they call us and say, hey, can you respond? We have some incident. So the second one would be a school referral where the school calls us and we respond to help them and partner with them for some type of situation. The third one is your SRO initiated. That is just kind of what it says. It is where we initiated some contact, where we saw something illegal or we saw something occur, and us being the witnesses to it, we take some type of action. And the last one we're reporting on is student reporting. So that is key with SROs. Like Officer Miller and Officer Imus have said, we build a rapport with students, and you can see in some of the graphs coming up that students feel comfortable with their SROs more so than sometimes regular patrol officers. So you will be working at a school and a student will come into your office and say, hey, I know you, I've worked with you, I have something to report. So that is the last one, where a student actually walks into our office and reports something. Something occurred to them and they feel comfortable with you, so they go ahead and report that. For the going into our first graph for the 2018-2019 school year, we have it broke down into the different both males and females, and then we have it broke down into some different racial groups. So for the 2018-2019 school year, you can see that as a department, as the SROs, for the two SROs that we had, they made 13 referrals to the juvenile system. So, and you see the percentage breakdown down below. But for a quick example, you got out of those 13, 8 of them were school referrals. One was a self-initiated, an officer saw something occur and took some type of action. And then 4 of those out of those 13 were actually reported by a student. Next slide. So for the last year, and keep in mind, this was a shortened year because of the COVID, but for 2019-2020 school year, the stats actually went up a little bit. We had 23 referrals. Once again, 19 of those 23 were school referrals. 2 were actually self-initiated activities. 2 were student reported. And it would also, if you look at this one, 2 parents were actually arrested by SROs. Both of those were domestic abuses where the kids actually came in and reported typically to the school administrators something happened, and the SROs took action and actually arrested a couple parents on domestic charges. Next slide.
Okay, it's Officer Miller again. So this is for the 2018-2019 school year for Tualatin Police Department. We had 24 total referrals, and 20 of those referrals were all school initiated. We had 1 SRO initiated referral, 2 dispatched referrals, and 1 student reported. And then you can see the rest demographics below. Kind of goes from the bottom to the top. Next slide. We get the next slide. Whoops, not that one. Did we skip a year? There we go. There we go. All right, so for 2019, 2020, that was kind of a shorter year due to COVID, but our calls for service at Tualatin, a lot of these were from Tualatin High School, but they generated 44 school initiated. We had a total of 56 total referrals. We had 44 school initiated and 4 SRO initiated, 4 dispatch calls for service, and then referrals, and then 4 student reported. And then the rest demographics below. Next slide.
All right, thank you, Officer Miller and Officer Nunn. You can also find the Tigard Police Department report and the Tualatin Police Department report on our SRO information webpage as well. And you can view that at your own pace. The next portion, I'd like to introduce John Lenson and Tara Cooper, who will be our moderators for this next portion. As stated before, the frequently asked questions that were highlighted in the previous section was very information-based. There were some requests from our survey that was taken earlier on in September, where community members wanted to hear from SROs specifically and our building administrators specifically about their experiences. So this portion will be the listening session portion. So I'll go ahead and offer that up to John and Tara. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Zinnia. The first question for the panelists is, what does partnership look like for you, from your perspective? And we're going to ask Andy to go first, and then other panelists will join in.
Absolutely, and I will welcome partnership for my colleagues here with this answer. Thanks for the great question, and good evening, everyone. Again, Andy Van Fleet from Fowler. For me, when I think about what does partnership look like with our school resource officers, and I think Officer Imus talked about this a little bit earlier, relationship is the absolute first thing that comes to mind within that resource that's provided. I look at our school resource officers very much as a fabric of our community. When our students come into the building, pre-COVID, unfortunately, get off the bus, come through the front door, oftentimes greeted with high fives, fist bumps, how are you doing, check-ins, and that extends throughout the school day of being present, being visible, moving into the lunchroom, again, greeting students, checking in on their lives, on their hobbies, on their passions, on their sporting events. Our current officer even occasionally does some magic tricks in the lunchroom. So it really a community feel in partnership with our school resource officers. In addition to that, I would add that there's a lot of mentorship conversations that occur. And I think Officer Miller mentioned sometimes when we hear or are aware of some more risky, risk-taking behavior, our SROs are a great resource. If I can't get through to a student how dangerous some of their activity might be or could potentially be in the future, our school resource officers are a great partner in helping frame and understand that as well. And we really try to take that tact of prevention a lot of times of how can we make sure that we are, as a team, as a family of adults in this building, are supporting our students and preventing them maybe from making poor choices down the road. So a lot of opportunities up front. Our officers act as role models, and I would be remiss if I didn't bring up the fact that when we have our fire drills and our safety drills, our SROs are absolutely critical in helping us make sure that our procedures work, that we can keep our buildings safe, that we're efficient, and we're able to do the things we need to do to be able to focus on the instruction all those other times to make sure students feel regulated and able to be present in the classrooms, knowing that they're in a safe building at the same time. So please help me out if there's other responses from other partners.
I think the other thing, Andy, that I would add is often our officers are a good sounding board when trying to work through problem solving to local resources. I can think of some incidents in the past where a student has reported to me there's some unsafe things happening in their life, and the officers can make a quick phone call and get resources to the school quicker than where I would need to go to. And that's happened in a handful of things that I can remember, even in the last year. And so having that partnership and that ongoing dialogue brings resources closer to our students, usually at a faster pace.
I would just add a couple other things. One being that mental health support. Sometimes we have students that are here and at school that are in a bit of a crisis, and our school resource officers are there to help respond to that and get students the support that they need, so that we can help them navigate the things that they're working through in a quicker, more efficient way than sometimes it takes to get families connected with resources. Our school resource officer can partner with us to get that support right away for students that are in a bit of a crisis. The second piece that comes to mind for me also is we have a Safe Oregon reporting system where students and families can report something that may be happening that is unsafe or somehow perceived as a threat to the safety of our students or staff. And our SROs are on hand to be reachable seemingly 24 hours a day to help us walk through some of those reports that come in outside of school hours. And if we didn't have those relationships, I know myself or Officer Miller or Officer Lemon, we can reach out to them at any time of the day and say, here's what's coming in. What do you think the best way is to make sure we ensure safety at this point? And if we were calling dispatch or non-emergency, I'm not sure we'd have that same partnership and be able to work through those reports in such an efficient and community-based way.
Yeah, Officer Imus here again. Just want to give perspective from the officer side of it. When I first started at Tigard High School, you kind of feel like the new kid at school, right? You don't know anybody, don't know what's really going to go on. But a big testament to Tigard High School is that throughout my time there, I didn't feel like an outsider anymore, just coming into their building. I really felt like by the end of my time there, that I was part of the school family. And as Dr. Sue said earlier, we all share the ultimate goal. Over those 4 years, you have those students, seeing them grow and mature and get ready for adulthood. So I really felt like I gained some lasting friendships out of it, and there was really a strong partnership, and I was a part of the school. So I appreciate that.
Russ Romas, principal of Creekside here. For me, the partnership looks a little different, not less important, but just a little different because we don't have a regular SRO presence on campus. A lot of the roles that SROs do play at other schools are played by school staff here with us. Yet those relationships with the officers, Officer Imus in particular, I've worked pretty well with. And when there's a situation where we got to call somebody, that always just goes better when we know somebody, we've got a relationship, we've got a rapport, and we're working on the same side of things to make sure we're doing what's in the best interest of the student. So that's a little bit of what partnership looks like. For us, it's a little bit more call when needed for that connection and support. Thanks.
Thank you, Russ, and everybody who responded to our first question. Let's move on to the second question.
What are the preventative programs or strategies Tigard-Tualatin School Districts implements in partnership with the SROs? Angelita, would you like to start us off with this question?
Thank you, Tara. Hi, I'm Angelita Miller again, Associate Principal at Tigard High. And this is going to sound a little redundant because really one of the biggest keys to prevention is creating relationships within the school community. And so our SROs, the ones that I've gotten to know over the last, this will be my 6th year at Tigard, have all been very interactive with students. They learn their names. They learn the things that students like to talk about. They are visible and present in all parts of the building, you know, to create a sense of safety and a familiarity for students and staff. And they join in activities like the thing that Imus used to like to do is shoot hoops with kids. He was kind of doing supervision, but also couldn't help himself. And so shooting hoops with students and also with staff. And then being really helpful as administrators were sometimes called out of the building for professional development. And it's always nice to have an SRO there to help with security and supervision when administrators are out of a building. One of the programs that we share as partners is the Oregon School Resource Officer Association training. And that is an annual training that happens during the summer, and we go with our SROs and we learn about things that are happening in our state that are relevant around safety. And we listen to keynote speakers that talk about real scenarios in like kind of like a play-by-play format, and we learn what happened in that situation and how it was handled. And then, you know, we have the ability to discuss with our partners, administrators, with the resource officers to talk about how we can prevent those kinds of things from happening. And, you know, just off the top of my head, those sessions are very memorable. And I remember talking about the Umpqua Community College shootings, and you know, we talked to officers who were actually there who handled the calls, and I don't think we had any of the students there who talked about it, but it was just very interesting, and we learned a lot from it. And then I also remember a session about some sex trafficking activity that's been happening in our state, and we heard from a person who was a victim, and it just was very impactful. And so in those sessions, you kind of learn what are the signs to look for in your school community, you know, to know if something like that is happening in the lives of your students. The SROs do some preventative things with the city of Tualatin. I know it's called Tualatin Together. And then at Tigard, they participate with Tigard Turns the Tide. And our resource officers from both schools participate in our district safety trainings and on our district safety committee, as well as our site-based safety committees. And, you know, like one of the most recent things that we worked on together as in a partnership was the implementation of our vestibules at all the buildings who got new construction with the vestibules, and keeping schools safe with protocols. And then I know that we, on a frequent, I mean, maybe it's a yearly or by you know, every 2 years, we do some major training around reunification and how to reunite families with their students if a catastrophic event were to happen in your school. And the resource officers are very involved with that, along with other, you know, safety community partners. And they're present in all of our safety drills, fire drills, lockouts, lockdowns, earthquake drills. And they, like Brian Imus had mentioned earlier, sometimes we invite more patrol officers in during those drills in order to receive feedback on how the drill went and to hear some ideas on how to improve the process. And then when we do those drills, we're both trained in the standard response protocol. And you know, we do that on a regular basis, once a month for fire drills, and, you know, several times a year for some of the other drills. And so that repetition for students and for our SROs is what creates safety, a sense of safety, and maybe a sense of calm when hopefully when the, if an actual event were to happen. And then a big one that I always remember is SROs helped us to plan a SKID training, which is a Stop Kids from Impaired Driving. And it's a major event that takes place on your campus. And it's a reenactment about the impact of drunk and distracted driving. And we usually have our upperclassmen at that big assembly outdoors, usually on the football field. And it's very realistic and impactful, I think, as well, in that we, create like a crash scene, and, motorcycle police arrive, fire trucks, ambulances, a life flight helicopter lands in the field. And then at the end, a coroner comes, and it's a big deal. There's a lot to organize, and we're thankful that our SROs partner with us for that event. And then, like Brian Imus said, our SROs are at our community events. So they come to athletic events, to dances, to assemblies, and even some weekend events like, for example, our graduation ceremony we hold on our campus at Tigard High, and thousands and thousands and thousands of families come to that event, and it's pretty big. And it's nice to have our SRO partners there, along with other Tigard police, to help with security in that situation. And maybe some officers will talk about that CIT critical incident training, or I don't know. I think that's maybe a good one to talk about next.
Before we do that, just real quick, I just want to add that they're not only resources for staff and students like we've talked a lot about tonight, but our SROs also partner with some of our family and parent groups, and they've given presentations to parents around drugs and alcohol and signs and symptoms and gang activity. And so really informative for our parents who also want to learn and know how best to support their children. And our SROs have partnered with us on that as well.
Yeah, this is Jamie McDonald from the Tigard Police Department again. And Mrs. Miller touched on CIT, or crisis intervention training. So one of the things that training entails is officers going through intensive training to help people of all ages, not just of youth age, people of all ages who might be in a mental health crisis. And so it's something that we really focus on trying to get our SROs to, because youth tend to have some of those, display some of those signs maybe more often than we might see in the community. And it's really critical to make sure that they have the appropriate training to address those. And obviously there are people in the schools that have that training as well. But it is very critical that the officers that are working in the schools recognize those areas and they're able to address some of those things. And then to some of the other points as well, it doesn't just stop at the high schools or even the middle schools. We also do spend time in some of the elementary schools in the district as well. And the SROs are requested to come in and make presentations maybe to a parent-teacher organization. So they would go in and maybe speak to those groups as well. So, and it could be on a variety of different topics. So there are quite a variety of things that the officers spend time doing to help educate and come up with different plans and programs to help make the school environment and community safer.
Thank you. We'll move to the next question now.
So some of this the panelists have already discussed and shared some experiences, but let's provide just a few more minutes to answer this more specifically. What are the responsive programs or strategies that we implement in partnership with school resource officers? And for this one, I'm going to ask Tyler to go first.
Thanks, John. So As far as responsive programs are concerned, a couple of the ones that I'm just going to highlight here, like you said, a lot of this has already kind of been touched on, but a couple of the programs that we utilize at the high school level is standard response protocol, which provides clear, consistent language around responding to potential emergency situations. Another program we partner with is also through LifeWorks, and that's Teen Intervene, which is a drug and alcohol prevention program. Works to support students and families as they go through substance abuse concerns. As far as strategies, other strategies that we apply, a lot of that has to do with debriefing after we run through our standard response protocol. And I would say too that they're just a huge resource for families that are looking for support with substance abuse. So anytime a student or parent is concerned about usage, they might contact our resource officer to get support that way. Another point would be, like, Brian Imus would be one of my first calls when we're talking about wellness checks or concerns for students related to risk or threat assessments.
Can we hear another perspective from another panelist on this question, the responsive programs and strategies?
Yeah, John, I'll add in. Tyler mentioned it just briefly, but when we think about our safety and threat assessment process, so if an event has happened where there has been a threat of harm, either self-harm or harm to others, one of our most significant partners in our collective threat assessment program, where we coordinate with the county, we coordinate with district, but oftentimes, most importantly, we collaborate with local law enforcement. And to have a school resource officer be in on that conversation to figure out what supports we can provide the student, the family, or other members of our school community, is somebody who's in our school community on a regular basis. They oftentimes know the kids, they have relationships with the kids, they might know the families, and to have a law enforcement member's perspective who also has a relationship with the kid can oftentimes put together some very positive supports for our kids who might be experiencing trauma or maybe at risk of hurting themselves or others.
Thank you, Brian. Could we perhaps hear from a school resource officer just on responsive programs and strategies implemented in partnership?
It's Officer Nunn. I think everything's been, I mean, we've covered a lot of stuff as far as programs we're in part of. When I think of this question, I think of the standard response protocol. My last stint as an SRO was when we actually implemented that. So that was a big partnership between the school district and the SROs on how this looks, what it looks like. We went to training together on what this program is going to look like. Other programs I think Officer Miller and I both touched on were the DARE and the GREAT programs. We participated, both departments have participated in those in years past, and to some degree still participate in some of them. But those type of programs are programs that I think of when I see this question.
Thank you, Officer. Oh, go ahead.
I can speak to this somewhat. Tualatin High School's taken a look at the data, and some of the data that was shown in the earlier graphs indicated a number of the arrests that came out of Tualatin. A lot of those were drug and alcohol related. And so one of the things we did is, as we looked at that data, we sat with our officers and we talked about how could we formulate a response to this in our community. And one of the things we did was provide more sessions for our community partners, our families, and specifically some of our families of color, around what to look for with their students, what to look for in their homes when it came to drugs and alcohols, and especially the specific drugs we were seeing show up within our school community. And offering those listening sessions were in a direct response to what we were seeing happen within our own school setting, as a result to what we were so that families knew what to look for. And that was a direct working relationship with our officers, with specific teams within our officers' community themselves, and for our families, and what our families were asking for in terms of their needs.
I was going to add one thing if there's time. I was just thinking about how a group of us administrators had an opportunity to attend the Center for Juvenile Justice Reform training, which is offered through Georgetown University. And what we walked away with was a real sense that in many cases where students might touch the courthouse door, it's really about organizing and being strategic about organizing supports, whether it be drug and alcohol related, mental health, et cetera. And so I've only got a couple of small examples of this, but I, informally organized some diversion opportunities for students that could have otherwise gotten in trouble. And the way that works is that maybe an officer can hold those referrals to the juvenile system based on some informal agreements for a time. And in that way, we've successfully helped some kids and partnered in response to some things that have happened.
Thank you, Russ, and all the panelists who responded to that question. Let's move on to the next slide, the next question.
So far we've heard of some programs and different activities where SROs are interacting with students and different members on campus. Can you tell us, panelists, about some specific situations or circumstances that might prompt initiating a response from an SRO?
Yeah, and I would say that because of the relationship building that's been happening between our SROs, our staff, and our students, when it comes to a response from the SRO, there's two things. There's just the response that they're present, they're there, they're visible, and just another adult that's a positive influence on students. When it comes to more of a police level response, those I would say are almost always related to significant safety concerns that are beyond what the school can take care of. So some examples of those might be where there's drugs and alcohol. We've talked about that drug and alcohol intervention that's happening, reports of child abuse or some kind of assault or violence against a student, whether that's something that happened in the school or just as likely to be reported something that's happened outside of the school, and the police are here and available. And I think most critically, they're trained and they have the understanding of a typical high school student specifically. We all know high school students, they are a unique breed of cat. So having an officer that can come in and understands how to work with them, how to talk with them, how to build those relationships, and perhaps already has that relationship built, that really is a different kind of approach than if we were calling just 911 and whatever officer was available on call to come help. Sometimes it'll be things like families coming in to report an issue. I think earlier in the data, the officers were referencing some arrests made because of child abuse reports that had come in. Anything that, again, is beyond what the school can handle. One example might be a fight that involves multiple people. And quite frankly, we need more bodies to try to identify what happened, who was involved, make sure everybody's safe. And so we might call on our SROs to help with those kinds of situations.
Thank you, Margie. Anyone else want to share of some situations that might occur?
Yeah, it's Officer Nunn again. I think of the welfare checks that oftentimes SROs are called upon to conduct, whether it's a student that hasn't been to school for a while, or I can think of times when counselors would call me and say, I'm really concerned about this kid. You know, they're having a really rough time at home. I'm concerned. Can you go do a home visit? And the times that I've been, and my experience, I've been a middle school and elementary school SRO, and I can think of times when there was at elementary school level where I responded to the home of an elementary school and, you know, conducted a home visit and determined that there were situations there that I needed to notify DHS. And without SROs, without that person, that partnership with the schools, that would have been a call where the school district would have either called DHS directly or would have had to call dispatch. So that partnership of the counselor knowing us and being able to call us and say, hey, student X, we're concerned about, can you go by their house? And the SROs have that flexibility that, yeah, that's not an issue. We can go by the house and check on them. So I think of welfare checks too as an important issue that SROs deal with.
I concur with you, Officer Nunn, and to add to that, an unfortunate aspect of high school and potentially middle school life is students that are depressed. We run across students that are making statements of self-harm. And so we will often use our officers to do checks on students that may have from home initiated a message that says, I am thinking of taking my life. And so I know that I have asked my officers to do a check on a student that may be in that position, as well as we have students, it is a digital age, and students will sometimes put out statements in an email to a teacher or an essay to a teacher that are off-putting and sound odd or not quite right. And we have to ask ourselves, what did the student mean by this? And did they mean a threat by this? Did they mean to harm someone when they put this statement out? And I have to work very closely with my officers when I run across a statement like that and have to analyze, is this kid all right? Are they going to harm someone based on what they put into these words? And my officer and I work in great partnership when we're in that moment, because as I'm sure you as community members understand, we take these things very seriously. Safety comes first. And the officer and I become a tight team in that moment as we work through a very tight protocol.
Thank you, panelists.
Shall we move to the next slide?
Oh, yes, please.
So we've heard some examples of these interactions, but what do they actually look like, from start to finish when an SRO is called in to respond to a situation or a request? What does that look like from start to finish? And for this one, I'm going to go back to Margie to go first.
A lot of it will depend on the specific kind of incident. I think a lot of the time, school administrators, our role is to keep a team involved. So if we're working with a student who's having an issue inside or outside of school, one of the first things we're going to do is figure out what information, what do we know about the student? What do we know about the concern that we're having about the student? We involve counselors, we involve specialists, our school psychologists, we involve other administrators, teachers that may work with the student. We involve if it's a learning support student with a kid with an IEP, we'll talk to their case managers and get all the information that we can come up with as a team, understanding of what might be the problem for the student, and then work from it from there. If it's a serious safety concern, for example, if we have something where there's a fight, our first concern is physical safety. So we involve the nurse, we get the students, we get everybody checked out. Our officers are a great resource to back up our nurse on the days where she's unavailable, because she's also supports some other schools. So they're the people that we call when someone gets hurt. They have advanced first aid training more than school personnel usually have, so they help us with that. We have access to translators, access to other support team people that we get involved in things like that. A lot of times the involvement with the officers could be as simple as clarifying, either just for the administrator like myself, I have a lot of questions being new to this area. How does this work in our system in this state versus Washington, where I've spent most of my life? So they can help clarify that. They can help clarify that for the families and for the students, work on that education process, talk about what steps people might take, families and schools might take to support the student. But then on the other side of that, also talk about what possible things might happen as consequences if this kind of behavior continues, especially when we get close to students turning 18 and they can talk about the consequences of that. Coaching students about legal rights and responsibilities. Our first priority is always educating the student. These are teenagers, their brains are not fully developed. It's our job to make sure we're providing them with the education and support. And our officers are just one more piece of that puzzle and that team to put that together with our students.
Thank you, Margie.
Hey, Officer Imus here again. One thing that comes to mind for me is a lot of calls we do are not law enforcement related, so a lot of them are going to look a little different in that sense. And like she just touched on, Margie, was that we're part of the team trying to figure out the solution, collaborate together. The big thing for me of having an SRO is we have the time to really sit down with the student if there's an issue and work through the problem. And that's the times where we actually break through a lot of barriers with these students that we come in contact with. And I'm not going to say that patrol officers don't care. They're just busy. If you had just a patrol officer come in, that's one of their calls in their day, and they're looking to do as good as they can do, but get done with the call and move on to the next one. Whereas we can really take the time to build that trust and relationship and really see if we can correct whatever issues going on.
Thank you, Officer Imus. Let's go ahead and move to the next question. We're a little behind schedule.
So our next question actually comes from the recent SRO survey. One of the practices that respondents recommend as a high priority is keeping students out of the judicial system. What's your perspective on this? Kim, would you like to start us off on this question?
Sure. We need to continue to work toward restorative practices. Our district has already started to take a move in that direction, as Russ alluded to and started to talk about. We've done some work with Georgetown University. Tualatin High School was also involved in that work and began conversations with our officers around what that looks like and how we as a school community work toward restorative practices and our work with our officers. We're leaders in this community. We have to begin to talk about issues that come up with our youth and working from the lens of education first, and looking at law and order second. We are an educational facility. That's what we do. We teach our kids first. And so that's where we start, at the root of that. And our officers are rooted in that as well. Our SRO officers are rooted in that. That's why they chose to work with youth. And they've leaned into this conversation to start. So I know we are in a great place to move in that direction. I'm confident in it. So that's where we start. We've got to move forward in that direction, and we will continue to partner with our SRO officers, other agencies. It's going to take continued conversations with juvenile justice, our DAs, but I believe that's where it starts.
Thank you. And I know we're short on time, but would one of the officers like to share your perspective on this?
Sure, it's Officer Nutt again. I think it's been touched on a lot already. A lot of these questions are getting repeated into answers, but I think what I go back to is it's a partnership. As an SRO, that's what we want. We don't want the kids. We chose to work with the kids. This wasn't an assignment where they said, hey, we need somebody to work in the school. We're picking you. This was something we chose as SROs. This is what we wanted to do. So that is our goal. We don't want to put any kids in the judicial system. Sometimes it unfortunately occurs, but I think as an SRO, that is what we're going into the schools to do, is to try to keep the kids out of the system. And it is a partnership with that school district. Officer Imus touched on it a minute ago, that as an SRO, we have time to work through problems with the school and with the students. Without SROs, if you make the phone call, you're still gonna get an officer that responds. That officer has another call to go to. So they don't have the time necessarily to sit there and say, okay, we realize this happened. What's the root cause of it? They're there to determine did something happen? What actions can be taken? And now I've got to go to my next call. Whereas an SRO has that time to work with the school and build that partnership and determine how can we keep this from happening again. We don't want, as an SRO, we're part of that school family. We don't want to have to come back tomorrow to deal with the same issue because it didn't get resolved the day before. So our job is to help facilitate an answer and not necessarily put them in the judicial system, but to work as a team to resolve those issues.
I wanted to add something along to that answer. So specifically, we've been working as a system along with our Washington County partners, and that includes Tualatin Police Department, to actually look at decriminalizing some of the actions that happen in school, from truancy and having a truancy officer like schools traditionally have, all the way down to having a diversion program for drug and alcohol incidents that normally, when I was going to school would have been automatic citations. So I think, in a sense, that is one of the ways that we keep students out of the judicial system, in the hopes of preventing that behavior from happening again through programming. And Kim alluded to some of that, but I wanted to name that we've specifically kind of targeted some of those typical actions and prevented them with current diversion programming.
Thank you, Officer Nunn and Michael. We'll go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So the next question, the survey also indicated that respondents understood that SROs have a big role in crime or violence prevention and school safety. What role do you see SROs having in violence and crime prevention in our schools and on a daily basis? I know this has been answered in some of the other questions, but are there any other additional areas that you'd like to take this opportunity to highlight?
I think I'll just chime in and say our SROs and having the relationships, and we keep talking about relationships, but having the relationships that they do, they know our kids and they're invested in having ongoing relationships. They come back day after day. They don't give up. They want to know the students, they want to know the families, and they are not giving up on those kids and the families. They are in our communities and they stay in our communities, and they're committed for 4 to 5 years in making a shift in what happens within that community and wanting to see the crimes rates go down.
If I can add on to that, this is Darren Bernard, the former principal at Tualatin High, and I've worked for a lot of years with our officers, and most recently within both cities. Our officers are also community members. They live in our community, their kids go to our schools, they're invested. And I can't tell you how many times our officers, I mean, they are available 24/7. I can call them at any time, night or day, and they always pick up. They'll even be on vacation and pick up, but then connect me to someone, another officer that can help us right away with an incident we're having, in our community or one of our schools. So they're just an invaluable resource. The relationships that they build with our parents, they're there on weekends. They wear their SRO hat during the daytime, but then in the weekends, they could be at the schools coaching a game. A lot of our SROs have coached at our high schools, and they're really involved in the lower levels as coaches as well, or as they just come along up through the ranks with their kids. Through athletics, so really ingrained in our community. So I think that's one of the key things, is they're well known. People know they can trust them, and they know who to go to, and they're such a great resource. I cannot say how many times I have just called them as a resource, and they can always connect me or direct me in the right direction. So invaluable for me and my time at the high schools.
Thank you. And thank you to all of the panelists. This has been a great source of information. And we have, on behalf of John and I, John unfortunately got kicked off with internet issues, but we sincerely thank you for your time and this wonderful insight that you've been able to share with us this evening.
All right, next slide, please. Thank you. So Tracy, if you wouldn't mind sharing about some opportunities for more questions to be populated, that would be great.
Yes, as mentioned earlier in the program this evening, we are continuing to build an FAQ answering all of the questions that we gather throughout this process. We're going to put the link to the Google form for you in the chat this evening, and we'll also be pushing it out through our social media platforms, and our partners will help us to push that out as well. So the link will take you to a form. You can include your questions in that form, and we'll continue to add that to our FAQ as we go through the process. Next.
Next slide, please. And speaking of the next part of the process, so our phase one was to gather feedback through our survey that was open in September. You have in front of you a few opportunities for community listening sessions, very similar to what we did here, where folks were able to listen to one another and listen to the SROs and the administrators. The first session, these sessions, the community listening sessions, will be hosted by John and Tara, as you saw, who are moderating today's session. We want to make sure that these opportunities are a little bit more intimate, so the cap is at 20. The goal is to offer opportunities for our SROs to hear from the community, as well as our TTSD administrators to hear from the community. And then for the last session, for those that might be a little worried just around giving feedback and so forth, we're holding that space specifically just for participants so that they can feel secure to share their thoughts openly. So we hope that you participate and join in there. Know that because it is limited, you might be put on a waiting list, and if folks do not respond, you will be able to join then. Then the third phase will be our SRO review oversight committee. There was a sign up and registration for that process. We have our partners from City of Tigard, City of Tualatin, Tigard Police Department, and Tualatin Police Department, as well as our staff here at TTSD joining into this process, as well as convening community members to review the data from our survey, the qualitative data from our listening sessions that John and Tara are hosting that they'll bring themes from, as well as getting more information around district data as well. Those sessions are a part of a series, as there will be specific tasks aligned to that across those 3 weeks. So we have October 15th, October 21st, and October 29th. I think October 15th and the 29th are on Thursdays, and the October 21st is on a Wednesday. So again, thank you so much for your time and joining us to learn a little bit more about the experiences of our administrators and our SROs. And I'm going to offer an opportunity for Dr. Sue and Dr. McCall to close out.
Dr. McCall?
I'll start by saying thank you to our panelists, our SROs, and our building level administrators for you sharing your perspectives from your roles, and then also giving us an opportunity to review the data. And then to our audience, thank you for being with us and listening, and we welcome you back. Dr. Sue?
Thank you. And I would only simply reinforce what Dr. McCall has said, nothing but profound gratitude for our panelists, for the members of our SROs, to our cities of Tigard and Tualatin, and to the entire staff that has supported this evening. And a special thank you to all who have attended this evening and are helping to populate the FAQ. The community process is incredibly important to us in the district. And I want to say thank you especially to Tara Cooper and to John Lenson, if he ever had the opportunity to come back with us this evening, for your facilitation, and to the city of Tigard for supporting the facilitators this evening as well with Resource. Again, thank you all for joining us this evening and helping us learn and listen together as we move this process forward. And we look forward, hopefully, to seeing you again at the listening sessions, and certainly as we continue the work with the Oversight Committee. And with that, we wish you all a good evening.